Hey, we're at reInvent, and as usual, AWS is making a lot of promises. What's real, what's not? You're watching Techstrong, gang. Hey, everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. It's Wednesday, and we are here having an amazing time at AWS reInvent, along with 60,000 other people strewn up and down the Las Vegas Strip. You know what's interesting is the gambling tables are not crowded.
No, not at all.
So I don't know if that means geeks don't gamble.
I don't know what the official numbers are, but there's definitely, in my opinion, less people here than there was last year.
Well, according to the keynotes yesterday, they said 60,000 people.
Yeah, I don't sense less. Seems like just as much, if not more.
But I can actually get places and on time, and I haven't been late for a thing yet. So That was not the case last year, that's for sure.
Well, maybe you're just a little lighter in your steps this year. You're a little, all that working out is paid.
No experience from last year.
Yeah.
It's true. I might actually know where I'm going.
There you go. Well, okay, we'll give you credit.
Could be. You don't have that Florida man disease going on. Yeah, that's probably it. Anyway, this is Mike Vizard. He's our Chief Content Officer, and he is man on the spot at AWS. If there's something going on, he's there. He's to my left, to my right. Futurum VP analyst. He's more cerebral about things. They come to him. Mitchell Ashley. Hey, Mitchell. Hey, Mike. How are you?
I'm good.
Before we go any further, I got to just say one thing. I heard a rumor, and it's only a rumor, that the czar of Silicon Valley actually got off his throne and drove down here.
I saw the czar.
You did see him.
Laying eyes on him.
So it's real. He's got a sighting. He's got a sighting.
He's only here for the day, though.
Is it days out?
Okay.
Well, we'll talk about it off camera. I mean, we didn't
Watch the show, you'll know.
Right. We didn't prepare for a royal visit.
No, well, we didn't tell him to be here either.
So I take it we're not paying for this?
I think he's on the Futurum nickel for that one.
Okay. Welcome, John.
He's heard all day.
All right. Maybe he'll take us to dinner. Okay. Moving on, though, we're happy John is here. Actually, we will try to hook up with him. So sorry he couldn't make it to John Swartz. That's what I'm referring to. Sorry he couldn't make it to our gang show today. But it's been an interesting AWS reInvent. Yesterday was sort of the big opening salvo keynotes. We had the AWS CEO up here. And I will tell you, this is the first time I've seen him live like that. And it's what I expected. This is a guy who's been working the innards of AWS engineering. I didn't think it was particularly dynamic, his presentation. I thought when Andy Jassy came out, it definitely stepped up 2 steps in terms of dynamicis. Well, it'd been more dynamic.
Well, Andy reserved the best stuff for himself, though. He was the one who was talking about the new models and all that.
Well, Nova, and we're going to get into Nova. My question is Nova an AWS offering, or is that an Amazon offering? Is that something consumers download? Is it just for developers? But we'll talk more about Nova in a moment. But there were several big announcements. One set certainly was around Nova. One set was around Silicon. A new second gen and a third gen promised, as often they do here at AWS reInvent. And then the third thing was Q Developer, which sounds like where if Nova is aimed more at an individual user, Q is aimed at your developer team.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And assorted other sundry items and 3+ hours worth of keynotes.
There you go.
Let's talk about that a second. I'll be honest, I have a front row seat here in our suite at the Wynn. I live stream the keynotes on this big TV behind us. It's a great way to watch a keynote rather than sharing the room with 60,000 people. Or worse yet, being shoved off into the press room or the analyst room or the bathroom or wherever it is you want to watch this. But still, 3 hours of keynotes. There's a lot of keynotes.
No.
Did you sit through the whole 3, Mike? Tell the truth.
I did. I sat through the whole thing. I might have took a bathroom break during the storage presentation because I knew there wasn't any net new there, so it was okay.
Well, they brought affordable storage to the masses.
Yes, again.
A bucket. Again. Once again. Yes, I sat through that one. But let's talk about the big stories, gentlemen. You mentioned Nova, so let's kick right off with that.
So Nova will be available through what they call the Amazon Bedrock service, which is this place where you can mix and match models as you see fit. There'll be ones from them. There's 6 in the initial launch. There'll be a bunch more coming behind that. And they're talking about multimodal a lot and those types of capabilities. They'll be available alongside Anthropic, which Amazon has put $4 billion into. And then they also will have Mistral and all these other folks there that you can mix and match these things. Now, I kind of feel like it's similar to a lot of the things that Amazon does, where they offer everything, but they kind of, push you towards their preferred thing. And I think we're seeing the same thing on the process
Across the board.
and database
It's the Amazon way.
and the whole 9 yards that go with that. So sometimes, I wake up in the morning and Amazon's kind of a distributor of different technologies. And then on the other hand, there's like, here's our preferred solution that we built ourselves or that we tweaked. And we think that this is the way you should go. I just don't know how many people are going the full bite on Amazon versus, thinking through about how much they might get locked into that. I was talking to NVIDIA about that very issue where they were like, we love Amazon and God bless them, but, customers are keen and aware of the portability issues, especially post that VMware issue. And their point of view on it was, our stuff is designed to be more portable. And if you can also split up the training and the inference engines a little bit more as you see fit. And, so they weren't like quaking in their boots over the fact that Amazon had a bunch of models and was going to build their own Trainium processors as alternatives to GPUs. But they were like, it's co-opetition in its finest.
There was a lot of jumping in the pool where there are other people there already.
In muddying waters, yeah.
I was almost waiting for, and this is included in your Amazon Prime membership. I'm serious.
Wait, it's not?
Yeah, well, we'll probably hear. He's seriously like, here you go. Go ahead and use
It is included in your enterprise license agreement.
Right.
And, you can determine how many resources you want to allocate in credits to various services.
image generation and the whole, any formatting.
So that's what,
all that. Why put it in Prime?
Nova more than the other things we're going to talk about. And I think that's why I felt that Andy Jassy was the one who did the Nova rollout, was aimed more at a consumer level, the same people who are paying $20 a month for ChatGPT or Claude or any of those.
When you peel back the release, though, it's part of that Bedrock service. So they're aiming that hard at ML Ops folks and those.
Yeah, but what are ML Ops folks doing? Creating images, creating videos for social media?
Well, they're using the APIs for that stuff to create next generation applications. So it's, through Bedrock, it's not just you as an end user, it's you involved.
So I can't go on as an end user and just subscribe to Nova Lite.
They have something called PlayRock where you can go in as an end user and kind of play around with anything you want, but it's not for building production applications.
Where you're going is they want you to embed it within your applications. It isn't
They want you to use that for your app.
Right. Use these APIs, make this part of whatever app.
AI-empowered applications.
It's part of Bedrock.
And let me just give a quick plug. I'm actually doing a center stage webinar because someone else couldn't make it. With some AWS partners on building and you harnessing AWS for AI-empowered applications. And I bet you we're going to, December 11th, and we'll be discussing Nova as part of that, I guess.
I'll bet.
Yeah. Did I tell you I was doing it because someone couldn't make it?
I heard that, there's a no-show.
It's okay.
I just don't know if, showing up with a bunch of models is going to make you supplant OpenAI and even Microsoft's those places.
But let's...
I think it's easier because it's there, right? Kind of thing that's built into Bedrock. I can just
And Bedrock's built into AWS.
Kind of the AWS.
This is right. This is their MO. They, I used to say they give you 80% of the functionality for 20% of the price. But you know what? They've gotten better. Maybe you get 85% now, but the bottom line is they give you, it's like using open source software. You could use the open source software. So what if you don't have a GUI, right? But you could use that open source software and create your own interface. You can do things with it. It may not be as easy to use. It may not be as powerful as the open core features built into some open source, but it's perfectly functional. And I think what AWS has here is perfectly functional.
Kind of their equivalent of the Google perpetual beta. I get them a product. I mean, not the same thing, but they have their own model.
They'll continue to tweak it and improve it so that it remains, I don't know if the word's competitive, but viable.
Right. But there is this AI arms race underway about, how big can I build the next trillion parameter LLM? And apparently that promises to be smarter and have better reasoning capabilities as it gets exposed to more data sets.
Well, size, if you haven't learned anything in life, size matters.
Yeah, but there's a contradiction in that because, it really is it the silver bullet, not the part way. Also, but is it the silver bullet of the next greatest, biggest model, or it was also the messaging around use whatever model you want. And we have this new kind of multi interface that will give us your prompts and I forgot the term to use for it.
I'm not even sure we might care how big the model is at the end of the day.
I kind of not impressed by that stuff.
Because they're
mansplaining.
They're saying small is now beautiful, and these domain small language models, and they have new tools that make it easier to build a small one off the big ones, so that I don't have to do all that stuff myself
for you. Right.
And so I think as far as the average enterprise is concerned, I think they're going to have a lot more of these smaller domain specific LLMs, and what was used on the back end to make them, is mildly interesting.
Do you really care?
No, but let me tell you what is more than mildly is very interesting. In creating these LLMs and training them, what process are you using is very interesting. And it's very interesting to both your friends at NVIDIA and our friends here at AWS. And that was a big announcement here today, right? At first, and I forgot the name of their chip. Titanium, not Tanium.
Tranium. Boy, I forgot it too.
Wow.
Glad I let you go first.
Yesterday's Intel.
Right.
From there.
Intel? Did anyone mention Intel? Let's not go there. But Tranium. So the initial release of Tranium, all the benchmarks for it was how it outperformed x86 processors. And God bless them.
Wow. They said it outperformed the existing GPUs that they have on the Amazon site today.
Right.
Yeah.
They weren't comparing it to
more specific.
Right. So they were.
No, but they also, the metrics he gave were for x86s too, for the Tranium 1.
Yeah, the Tranium 1. Yeah.
I was talking about Tranium 1. They've now pivoted and they announced Tranium 2, which is somewhat available right now.
And
will be available
30 to 40% more efficient than GPUs.
That's the GPU killer, right? The NVIDIA player.
Theoretically,
I didn't test them, but that being said, clearly they pivoted from x86 processors being the competition to GPUs being the competition, and because they wouldn't do that. And they specifically mentioned two use cases, right? One was in training and creating your models. And one was in, not iterative, what do they call it? Inferencing.
They think x86 is in the rearview mirror because of Graviton and the ARM processors. One of the things they said...
Graviton was the other one they mentioned, yeah.
One of the things they said 2 days ago is that half of all their new workloads are running on Graviton. And it's like, that's a huge amount.
And that is an 86 killer.
Yeah, right. So
it is what it is. But well, it didn't do Intel any good, that's for sure. Though one may say, hey, if Amazon designs a Graviton or a Tranium, someone has to build those chips. You need foundries. Let's have foundries built in the US. That that could be a new Intel or a part of Intel or
And also
a spin-off.
who might buy that from Intel.
Well,
and
Yeah, and all those Graviton chips are based on ARM, and ARM's principle was always that very same thing. It was like, we design it, but
We could build it anywhere. And
wherever you want.
but let's be fair. There are some who say that if AWS ever came up with an original idea on these things, we'd kill over, right? Google is doing that. Microsoft is doing that. Oracle, everybody's looking to build their own silicon right now.
I don't know who decided to do that first, and it might have been, these things go back in time. AWS was pointing out that the Nitro thing that they built for virtualization is a chip that they built to run virtualization themselves specifically. And that's how that whole thing functions. And it's what they call their key differentiator. But, so I think Amazon's been thinking about building custom silicon.
I think they all dreamed. If you're a cloud provider and you said, one of my big expenses, well, electricity, air conditioning, real estate. But what about the equipment, that CapEx? Chips.
Yeah, there you go. That's where they come to it. So I think that, they have some engineering chops on the silicon. I'm just not quite clear. They're saying that they built theirs so it scales better than a general purpose x86 server would. And they're probably right, but I couldn't tell you for certain how much original engineering went into that versus, did they tweak the design and the workflow and the data flow for a particular. Well, actually, now that I think about it, 2 days ago, they were spending about an hour and a half going through that various thing about how they optimized where the data runs in a processor and everything else. But, isn't everybody else doing something similar? Probably.
I got to move us along here.
Okay.
But Graviton, Trainium 1, they announced Trainium 2, which is on par with today's GPUs.
Yeah,
And then I guess I would call it a pre-announcement.
Yeah.
They probably have a different name for it.
Earlier this
Yeah.
year, too.
With Trainium 3, which is really being pegged to meet or exceed the latest NVIDIA, which I thought was interesting. They started off with an NVIDIA partnership background and then talked about how this chip's going to be better than the latest NVIDIA chips.
Yeah. Put in their infrastructure.
Yeah.
NVIDIA.
Trainium 2 that lines up with somewhere between the existing Trainium, somewhere between the existing GPUs and this Blackwell thing that NVIDIA is coming out. And then I'm pre-announcing something for late 2025 that exceeds Blackwell theoretically. And it seems like they want to leapfrog.
Guys, we're in Vegas. They want to cover the whole roulette board.
There you go.
Play red and black.
And just hope it doesn't come out 0 or 00.
000.
The only thing that is kind of not accounted for here is this portability argument. A lot of people are training models in the cloud, but the data that they need to run it against isn't in the cloud. It's in a data center that they run.
Until they can get it into their S3 buckets.
VMware systems in the cloud. Then guess what's coming with VMware?
So how many of those snowball appliances do I have to buy to get all my data from that on-premise environment into the cloud once?
And then you're how?
I think more than once.
We're AWS. God damn it. Let's move along. So Trainium 1, Trainium 2 is out. Trainium 3 is coming. Maybe your GPU of the future lives right here. We've got Nova Lite, Nova Pro. It uses all of the usual suspects.
It comes with some extra schmear.
Yeah, an extra schmear.
A whole lot.
With a scooped out Bialy. But the other big announcement or area of announcements for me, because there was some S3 stuff, but we'll cover that another time, was the Q developer stuff. Mitch, I know I saw you sitting on the edge of your seat. Yeah. After 2.5 hours,
Infrastructure. Oh, development.
Yeah, here we go. But, look, I felt like this was a Michael Corleone day. Today's we took care of all family business. We're going after Microsoft, VMware, and those damn mainframes. It was them all along.
Well, we've gone past the chatbot. We've gone past we can generate and help complete code, and we're in this cycle, right? And when are we going to do something to really kind of add direct value to the bottom line? And what's the biggest impediment, it's toil, it's the backlog, it's all the things that we don't have time to do, that we get pulled off of business income generating, revenue generating activity. So their announcement, they first talked about, being able to do code reviews and generate test cases, and that's not new stuff. We've heard that from Atlassian, Broadcom, so they're entering the fray there. But where it really got interesting to me was, okay, let's talk about modernizing your applications. Let's start with, we'll help you upgrade Java. Okay, that's mildly interesting. Let's talk about .NET, Windows. There's your Microsoft kind of coming after you. Come into our environment, move off of .NET. We'll put you onto, Linux operating system and, a different language and something that.
Well,
licensing cost.
Here's what it is. App modernization is AWS code for get rid of people or products we don't like and come onto our
licensing fee
infrastructure.
So they did take a direct shot though at Microsoft, and they said specifically, you run .NET apps on Linux so that you don't have to pay for Windows.
Exactly.
And they weren't converting .NET yet into something else. I'm sure that's on.
No. Huge developer takes .NET and moves it into other languages. And they took a direct shot at VMware licensing too.
That was the other.
They said, get rid of these licenses.
AI to help you migrate off of VMware, which to me, connect the dots is, okay, well, if you're going to move your mainframe, are there other things that are running on VMware? Then why not have your data in the cloud too? Isn't that where you're going to want it if you're moving more of the apps to AWS? So that gets you into the AI ecosystem.
Yeah.
Now you got your data.
But here's what occurred to me listening to the VMware specific piece was, I get it. People are upset with Broadcom's licensing. But if you're already going through this transformation, app modernization, are you going both feet in and moving to a Kubernetes container-based architecture and using maybe serverless and Kubernetes? Or are you just taking, same, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, I still have a hypervisor?
Well, or the way I looked at it was, I'm changing programming languages, I'm changing databases, I'm changing kind of the operating system that I run the app in. Then there's now I want to take it a step further. Let's do microservices and serverless and service mesh and containerize. So re-architect the application at the same time. So I think it's you can go either path. I don't know that they talked about re-architecting the app to microservices. Did they in the announcement?
They didn't use the word microservices.
There's a semi-religious argument about it. So on the one hand, first you got to convert VMware VM into an open source VM, and then you can encapsulate the open source VM, and then that becomes a big ass microservice, and then that talks to a bunch of little microservices, and that's kind of how they're theoretically doing it. But I was scratching my head about it, and I was like, well, if I look at all this application modernization, and I got an existing app, and I'm going to go to all that effort, wouldn't I just write a new app and call it even and start it over?
So let me start there. I've been gone down that path multiple times in my career. That is the quickest career-ending move you can do, is sign up to rewrite the billing system.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen.
It's right out of Phoenix Project.
Oh, it is
the payroll system.
Career-ending move. And I think that's the big challenge. It's why there's so many mainframe applications still around, is they are extremely costly, they fail, and they take a long time to fail.
Yeah.
So I think if it really proves out that they can do this, get you off the mainframe, we have that ability with AI. There's a lot of things that go into. I think what's missing is, okay, yeah, I can transform it for you, but that's just the code. That's just the structure of it. How do you get it off of the mainframe and move it into a completely different environment?
So we went from
a binary process.
We went from going to a cloud native from VMware to coming off mainframe. And I'm going to tell you something. My mom always told me never discuss religion and politics. And I don't discuss either. So,
just flipping that off. He says of this funny.
Yeah, he says, we'll be back tomorrow, folks.
He has to sign that agreement every morning.
But we do think if you're going to go through the trouble of coming off VMware, you might as well go whole hog and go microservices and do that whole thing. Now, The mainframe, though, is a whole nother issue. There have been people claiming that they're going to migrate you off the mainframe pretty much since the mainframe was developed. You go tell some CFO that you're going to walk away from your $750 million investment in that piece of big iron to go move to a great CapEx thing at the cloud and wait till you, don't I already get enough cloud bills? So I think, if you think this spells the demise of the mainframe, rumors of its demise is grossly overstated.
And the people that work in the mainframe know how fraught it is to try to.
Yeah.
It's just replacing a database that you're using and moving to something else.
I mean, it's impressive. They're going to take your COBOL. And it was interesting they said this. They said, we're not going to take your COBOL app and put it in the cloud. We're going to take your COBOL app and give you documentation for it that allow you to make some decisions.
Which will reduce the amount of time in half, which is to say that it already takes 2 years. Now it might only take 1 year. And so I was kind of like, guys, that's nice, but it's
2 years is really 4 to 5.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think
years. Yeah.
I don't think I know anybody who, maybe 1 or 2 people claim that they have successfully made a migration off the mainframe, but everybody else I know complains about, the kids from the system integrator who moved in for a year and it cost them a fortune to have those kids just to document the code, only to discover that they couldn't move it in the first place.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think the people that I wouldn't expect AWS to understand what it takes to modernize a mainframe application. Not that they can't get that, but that's a whole nother environment. And that is such a massive shift. It's not an easy check.
And you're going to do it just to do it, because penny for penny, dollar for dollar, it's still the most efficient, secure platform that a lot of organizations have. For what?
It's a workhorse.
Yeah.
And what is it truly? Do you always want to replace skills? You want to upgrade it? Some things, yes.
The fear factor that I hear people responding to is they're worried that they cannot find enough COBOL programmers. However, in the age of AI, we may not worry about it.
You don't have to. It'll write it for you. And not just, and the mainframe runs things other than COBOL.
But write it in PL1.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, I got to pull the plug. Oh, we've got a full day today of more live from reInvent, some stuff from last reInvent, and some great content coming at you on Techstrong TV. Mike Mitchell and I will be back tomorrow with an AWS wrap-up and a reInvent wrap-up. And we hope you're enjoying our coverage out here in slightly cold, chilly Las Vegas, but not as cold as it was last year. Until then, though, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong Gang. Have a great day, everyone.
This is Techstrong TV.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back here to Techstrong TV. My next guest is Gary Bartlett. Gary is the public sector CTO for Illumio. Illumio, if you don't know, well, Gary's going to tell you about Illumio if you don't know. But first, let's say hello and hear about Gary. Hey, Gary, welcome to Techstrong TV. How are you?
I'm doing great, Alan. Thank you for having me today. I appreciate it.
It's our pleasure to have you on. Gary, before we jump into Illumio and we're going to talk about cyber in the next administration, let's hear a little bit about your journey.
Sure. I've been in the cyber realm for basically my entire adult life. Started off, I spent 20 years as a cyberspace operations officer in the United States Air Force, retired as lieutenant colonel, and then became a federal CIO for 10 years at the Office of the Inspector General for the United States Postal Service.
Wow.
So I've been around DoD for 20 years, and then federal government for another 10 years. And after doing that for 30 plus years, finally decided it was time maybe for a slight change. And so I came over to the private sector, and where I joined Illumio as the public sector CTO about just shy of 3 years ago.
Good for you. So I wasn't always on this side of the camera. I actually did a number of public a number of venture-backed startups, some went public. But one of them was in cyber, still secure, and about 60% of our business was federal space. And for those of you out there who have never had the pleasure of dealing in the federal space, it's really a world unto itself. It's a market unto itself. It's a huge market. I forget. I used to know what the IT spend in the federal budget space were, but it's literally hundreds of billions, right?
Yes.
When you go through it. And DOD within the Fed, right? Fed space, you have civilian and DOD. Within the DOD and the three-letter agencies, it's yet another sort of labyrinth of procurement and contracts and certifications and so forth. So God bless you for doing what you do. And and this, by the way, is a pattern. We see people who've lived that Fed world for a number of years, and then companies like Illumio who want to be in the Fed space, they need people like Gary
And
to navigate this.
And that's exactly why they brought me over, right? I'm familiar with the policies, I'm familiar with the language, I'm familiar with all the contracting, the rules surrounding money,
Yep.
how is secured and spent, and as you said, it's a very different world unto itself, and it's very hard to understand if you haven't actually lived it.
Yes, sir. Our mistake was we were selling something called NAC back then, Network Access Control. And we had big contracts with the Army, the NMCI, Navy Marine Corps Internet, Department of Interior, a whole bunch, and other agencies and stuff. But what happened was we made our product so specific to what the feds wanted that it really was not as good as a commercial product because it was military grade, right? It was, it was built for them. But anyway, you live and learn. Gary, Illumio. Some folks out here have heard of Illumio. I'm sure some folks out here are probably Illumio customers even. But there's a lot of folks who haven't and aren't. So why don't you, if you don't mind, give us a little bit of the Illumio story?
Absolutely. So Lumio is coming up on 11 years old. We got started in the financial sector, working with banks. So we are a micro-segmentation company, which means that we focus on internal to the enterprise and trying to answer the question, what happens after the inevitable breach happens, right? So when you look at a lot of enterprises today, they spend a lot of time, energy, resources into preventing a breach, but really don't pay any attention to what happens after a breach occurs, right? So how do you prevent the initial breach from spreading laterally inside your enterprise, right? In the zero trust realm, that's often referred to as an east-west movement. So what do you do once an adversary, once a piece of malware, once a piece of ransomware has gotten inside your enterprise? What do you have in place to prevent that from spreading? So that's where Illumio comes in. We provide a very easy way to do a couple of things. One is we allow you to visualize in a nice map, in a nice graphical way, what things are touching what. From which applications are talking to which other applications, which servers are talking to which other servers. And we do that in a very user-friendly manner that is network agnostic. And the reason why network agnostic is important is adversaries or malware, they don't care about the underlying routers and switches that are connecting things. They care, can one server talk to another server? Because that's how they jump. That's how they move.
Yep.
That's right. They compromise one server, then they look and say, what other servers can we get to compromise? So what Illumio does is we come in and we create individual little compartments inside your enterprise. So we ask ourselves, which servers should be talking to which servers, and let's turn everything else off. If servers don't have any reason to talk to each other, then they should not be talking to each other.
A classic zero trust, right?
Absolutely. So fits very well into that zero.
Your blacklist.
Absolutely. So we get into really, if you're really doing this right, it's an allow only model, right? You only allow the traffic that is absolutely necessary for applications to function, and you turn everything else off. We love using the visualization of a submarine, right? Everybody kind of has seen movies with submarines, or maybe they've been on a real submarine. So it's really, when you look at a submarine, they have all these little individual compartments, right? And why do they do that, right? Why do they have all these individual doors that they can shut? Well, if the submarine springs a leak without all those individual compartments, the submarine's going to flood and sink, right? So with those individual compartments, you can shut off all those individual compartments, and one individual leak doesn't cause the submarine to sink. So in the cyber realm, that means that a individual breach, right, a cyber breach doesn't turn into a cyber disaster, right? You don't have,
It gets contained.
it gets contained, and you don't have the entire enterprise end up getting owned. So that's really where Illumio comes in, and we do this with cloud native, we do this with on-prem, and we do it with endpoints. So we're a platform that allows you to very easily visualize all those connections I talked about, and then easily put in place rules that allow you to say, these are the things I want to allow, and then everything else I'm going to turn off. I'm going to shut the doors that need to be that don't need to be open.
Breach containment.
Breach
I wonder
containment.
why Gartner hasn't coined that term yet. Usually they're good at that stuff, right?
Yes, Gartner's starting to come around to all of this. They've issued some recent publications regarding this. Forrester actually has a Forrester Wave that discusses.
Well, there's sometimes, well, I'm not here to compare Gartner to Forrester, but sometimes a little, Forrester can be a little more on the edge, no pun intended, in recognizing some of these new trends. Gartner will wait until a percentage of their base, customer base is talking about it. But certainly breach containment, I think, is a great way of thinking about it. Jerry, Illumio.com. That's ILLUMIO.com.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So yeah, I would encourage anyone. We've got some great material out there that'll help you really understand what we do and how we do it. And I encourage everyone out there listening to go take a quick look.
Fantastic. I want to turn, if it's okay with you, to our topic of discussion today. It's a bit of a ritual in Washington. With every new administration, out with the old, in with the new. Who made promises on the campaign trail? Who's going to live up to their promises? Are we changing for change's sake? And it's, it's kind of the democracy cha-cha. Sometimes we take one step forward and two steps backwards, sometimes two steps forwards and one step backwards, but it's very rarely linear. There's always a zig and a zag and fits and starts. We're at that juncture again come January 20th, whatever it is. We'll have a new administration who promised to really shake things up and some radical things. And, at this point, we're kind of reading goat innards and tea leaves and crystal balls. But that being said, wanted to ask your opinion on what this new incoming administration may mean for cyber specifically in the 4 years ahead.
Sure. So as you said, right, it's your guess is as good as mine right now. We'll see once as they say, butts get into seats and you see what they're actually going to do. But a couple of things that I think give me some high confidence that in the world of cyber, I think that we're going to see continued progress. I think the Biden administration has made great progress with regards to federal cyber initiatives. And I honestly expect the Trump administration to continue that. A lot of people forget that CISA was founded under the Trump administration. Right. A lot of people forget that. Right. So CISA, the institution that it is today, owes its existence and its origination back under the first Trump administration. And President Trump issued an executive order that directed federal agencies to focus more on cyber. So I don't think that there's this lack of understanding from this incoming administration on the importance of cyber and how critical it is for government entities, the public sector, to really take it seriously and understand the threats that are out there in the world today. I would argue, having been, 20 years in the military and dealing with nation state threats and watching, worrying about, tanks rolling through Europe or, flare-ups in the Middle East and things. Cyber is the domain we're fighting in today, right? It is the largest domain that we are fighting in. And I don't think that's lost on anybody, and I don't think it's lost on this incoming administration. So I don't think that there's going to be some sort of, bury your head in the sand and pretend like there's no threats in the cyber realm. I honestly don't see that at all.
So who thought we'd have tanks rolling through Europe again? Right.
Right. What's all against you?
I'm assuming you're around my age. we grew up in a Cold War era where that was, are
Absolutely.
they going to come from East Germany into West Germany? But we
Absolutely.
never really, at the end of the Cold War, we thought tank warfare in Europe is probably in the history books, but it's real. Yes, the Trump administration did start this. They also fired the administrator because he said the election wasn't rigged. Um, so with one hand they give, and with the other hand they take away. But this is the way of it. But here's what not bothers me, but concerns me. I agree. The Biden administration, the executive orders, much like the Trump administration, executive orders have given us some backbone in what we want to do from a cyber perspective. This has grown since it was originally founded, and I think they've done yeoman's work over the last administration. However, both the Biden administration and the Trump administration, 95% of what they've done around cyber has been by fiat, by executive order, not with the consent and approval of the United States Congress. And if we look at recent Supreme Court rulings, they're getting kind of squirrely about agencies and commissions and so forth acting without congressional authority and mandate. And quite frankly, our Congress has not had a great history over the last 12 years, maybe more, of having the political will to get things done, even things that seem like nonpartisan, like cyber. Cyber is a nonpartisan issue. No one raises their hand and says, yeah, I want us to be attacked by a foreign state, nation state player, or to have ransomware. Everyone wants good cyber hygiene and regulations. But we don't have other than by, as I say, fiat, by executive order, we haven't been able to get bills passed, it seems.
Right. So it's going to be
Laws made.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, right? So what that Supreme Court decision that you referenced does, if it changes the outlook of Congress a little bit, I'm all about one of my big things that I like to preach is accountability, right? It's hard to get things done if you're not going to hold people accountable for getting those things done, right? If someone can dodge accountability, then there's no repercussions, right? Then what's the incentive to sometimes to get things done? I think in some ways maybe Congress has been able to dodge some accountability because of the fact that executive orders were able to do things, right? And the agencies could do things without them having to take a stance on things, right? So it'll be very interesting from my perspective to see what happens now that, as you said, there's been some rulings that say, no, you can't do these things by fiat. Congress, if you want these things done, then do it, right? Then get together, figure out the compromises you need to figure out and put these things into law, right? And also the nice thing about things getting put into law, they have a little more tangibility of holding others accountable, right?
Sure.
And you can say, it's one thing to say, oh, it was an executive order, and everybody kind of shrugs and goes, okay, that sounds great. But when you say, oh, it's a federal law, right? That's a completely different conversation, right? You can be held accountable, you can be sued, right? You can potentially get fined or go to prison.
Right, yeah. I mean, you have the full weight and authority.
Absolutely. So I am optimistic, right? I like to be a glass half full kind of guy. I am very optimistic that maybe even with those changes, as you mentioned, that maybe it's going to force Congress, especially something that as you said, that is not political, right? Everybody agrees that cyber is important, right? I am hoping that now, as the new Congress comes in, they're all going to get together and realize that, hey, if we say cyber is important, if we know that we're under attack, if we know that we've got this obligation, right? And I've considered a moral obligation, right? When you look at the federal government, it's got a lot of information about its citizens, about the citizens of the United States, a lot of very sensitive information. When it comes to intelligence and the DoD, right? We have a moral obligation to protect that information that we have, that the government collects.
It's a strategic obligation.
Absolutely.
We can't. That's one of the big things with TikTok, for instance, right? They think it's owned by a Chinese company and that the Chinese government is collecting information on American citizens.
Yeah, and at some point, we gotta own up, right? We have to, and that's why I'm hoping, right? I'm a very optimistic kind of guy. I am hoping that Congress is going to realize that, hey, the only way that these things are going to be done is if they act, right? That they're going to have to get together and they're going to have to figure out how to cooperate in such a strategic realm of strategic importance that they're going to have to get together and pass some legislation. And I argue it's not just the passing the legislation, but the funding to go with it.
Well, that's the other part of it, right? Because Congress holds the purse strings. And I think, we spoke about PII and stuff like that, but look, to me, in an age of terrorists, in an age of nation-state espionage, nation-state warfare, where cyber is the new battlefield, critical infrastructure, both private and public, has to be an imperative of our government to protect. And I think it all depends on, does Congress want to, throw spitballs on both sides of the aisle, or do they want to get together on something that we could get together on and do something, right? That's going to, for lack of a better word, it's not going to upset anyone if we actually did something around cybersecurity and protecting our critical infrastructure and our nation's secrets and the personal information of our citizens. The other thing I kind of not worry about, but I'd like to see us make sense of, is in the nature abhors a vacuum, and in the absence of our Congress passing laws, we've had many states pass laws, which is good for them. I applaud them for having the political will to do it, but it creates a quilt, a patchwork, where all of these laws don't necessarily, lock up. So you got, how are you supposed to have one law for here, one law, when the internet knows no borders? It's the same thing with the EU, frankly, right? The EU, they pass stuff all the time. And
you think about the impact it has on companies like Illumia, right?
yeah.
Right, we're trying to provide capabilities, and if all of a sudden we're dealing with a patchwork of laws, right, that, like you said, very, very often or could be in conflict with each other, right? How are companies supposed to innovate while trying to navigate that weird maze of this patchwork of laws, right? So, I'm hoping things like that are going to spur Congress into understanding that they have to work together. If you think about the recent, the big news story about the hack of the telecommunications companies, right? It wasn't targeted at one party or another, right? It wasn't targeted at any particular group. That was targeted against the United States of America, right? I think we can all get on board to go, we got to do something, right? And that's where
That's critical infrastructure to me.
Absolutely. And that's where I'm hoping that Congress, right, with some of these recent changing, referencing back to that Supreme Court decision, that Congress is going to start to be held accountable, right? And at the end of the day, right, voters can speak with their votes if they need to, right? If voters feel like Congress, is not working to protect them, right, they may try to find others who may have a better ability to work together to try to protect them.
So that's an interesting point. I've been in cyber 25 plus years, and forgive me if I've grown cynical, but I've been waiting a long time for the people to rise up and say, God damn it, we're fed up and we're not going to take it anymore, right? We want strong cybersecurity regs in place. Now, for a long time, the cybersecurity industry went the other way. We said, look, we'll take care of ourselves because we don't want the government to police us. We'll, industry groups, PCI and stuff like this, in lieu of government regulation. But, people vote for their pocketbooks, as we've seen in this election more than anything else, right? People vote for their pocketbooks. Unfortunately, until we have I don't want to use the term cyber Pearl Harbor, but a serious cyber event that's going to affect people's lives and rally the public to do something here. I don't know if our elected officials kind of feel the heat, right? I think it comes more from the insiders, the experts saying, hey man, this is a huge risk. We got to do something.
Right. And I agree, right? I think that something like that certainly could be the catalyst that will drive change.
I mean, I'd hate to see it come to that, though.
Me too, and that's why I'm optimistic, right? I like to be the hopeful kind of guy. Having been doing this for a long time, it's sometimes hard to be the optimist in the room, but I really, really strongly believe that over the next couple of years, Congress is going to agree that they've got to come together on the topic of cyber, right? That they've got to, we're quite frankly, right, we've got some serious problems that need to be addressed in the world of cyber, and at some point, right, those problems are going to rise up. And I am hoping, I'm very hopeful that Congress is going to come together and realize that, hey, we better do something before that cyber Pearl Harbor happens, right? Because if we don't, and when you look at recent recent issues around the world, the way that like Russia used cyber, in its attacks against Ukraine, right? Those things are getting attention, right? People are realizing that the next event could be us, right? And we could be dealing with the Chinese or the Russians or insert your favorite.
Or Iran or North Korea. I mean, North Korea is a country that supports itself by hacking.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I am hoping that and the other thing that comes into play, right, is as over time as new members get elected, right, you're starting to see the members who are getting elected to Congress have grown up in the digital age, right?
Yeah, more internet. Yeah.
They're a little more intimately familiar with the digital age, not just the benefits of it, but also the threats of it, right? And how delicate that cyber can be at times, right? So I'm hoping that kind of thing also is starting to turn the tide a little bit with Congress, that they're going to realize that there are actions that they are going to have to take. And again, I go back to the fact that they're not going to be able to rely as much on executive orders, fiat by agency heads to declare things. That they're going to realize that responsibility is theirs, and they're going to have to I think step up and live up to that responsibility.
I agree with you. I wish we had more time, Gary, because another topic is the incoming administration has a lot of tech people, who put big money.
Yep.
People don't put money in without a payback, right? And what's it going to mean for tech and vis-a-vis cyber? But unfortunately, we'll have to save that for another time because this 15 minutes turned into 25. But hey, it's been great having you on here. This is a really interesting topic, obviously, for people like you and I. I think it's a great topic for our audience as well. Keep up the great work at Illumio, Gary. Keep fighting the good fight. As they say in the DoD, it's all about the mission.
Absolutely.
Right?
Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to come back anytime and chat with you some more about this stuff.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting as it unfolds. We'll do that. Gary Bartlett, Public Sector CTO, Illumio, here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with more.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of From the Source with your hosts, me, Ilka Turnen, and...
Hi, I'm Brian Fox.
And today, Brian, guess what?
What?
The year's over, that's what. I know. It feels really weird even to say that, but so it has occurred. That's we're at the end of the calendar cycle. Turkey's in our future, and gifts and all that sort of stuff. And the theme for today's episode is a little bit special because what we wanted to do was really to talk a little bit about what does the crystal ball say is going to happen in the industry next year. So with that, Brian, let's do a quick recap. 2024, huge amount of supply chain issues. We had big deals like XZ. We had smaller deals, huge hacks like Snowflake. We've got one going on right now that's in the news with lots of advanced persistent threat actors. Mm-hmm. Research revealed that open source is being consumed more than ever before, AI explosion, all of that sort of stuff. So let's just ask a very simple question. Where is it all leading? Like, what are we going to all have to care about next year with all of that? I'm going to lead you on with an idea. XZ feels like it's a bit of an omen, doesn't it?
Yeah. Like I've said this before that the XE utils, the long running, attempted takeover of a critical component, that was accidentally discovered earlier this year, is not a single incident. There has been one more disclosed, and I'm aware of at least one more that is still being investigated. So I think the headline is everybody feels like we found the thing, we got lucky, and we moved on with life. The rest of us are looking at it going, no, these things are still happening, and we just haven't discovered them yet. They will turn up at some point in the future. Hopefully we catch them before they're massively impactful, but I'm not betting on all of that. So that's certainly a big thing that leads in that direction. As you know, over on your side of the pond, they just recently, officially published the CRA and the PLD into your book of laws. I forget what it's called.
The official journal of the European Union, which fires the starting gun of the implementation period.
That's right. So they published a CRA it'll take effect exactly on the 3rd anniversary of the Log4 Shell incident, right? And that has a 2-year phase-in period. It becomes effective 2027, but there are some things that take effect in 2026, right?
So there's sort of a 3-year implementation period for most of the obligations. So for those of you who might not know what we're talking about, CRA, Cyber Resilience Act, we have a whole episode about regulations. Long story short, minimum cybersecurity standards for software, you have to follow them and get it self-certify or get certified, depending on a little bit on what kind of product you're building, in order for your product to be available in the European Union market if it's a software product. So with that, the implementation timeline is a little bit of sort of jiggle in there as far as I understand. But 2026, end of 2026 is when they are expecting you to be able to monitor for any new security vulnerabilities affecting your software and be able to let your customers and the authorities know about it if it affects you. And in 2027, the wider sort of minimum security requirements, including the certification that you followed them, kind of falls into action. So that's quite a lot of things to get done in less than 3 years.
Yeah, so I think, because there's a couple year phase in, and frankly, the specifications and standards that the legislation depends upon aren't yet fully hammered out.
No, totally not.
This next year, you and I are both going to be involved in a lot of working groups, both at Eclipse as well as OpenSSF. There's multiple groups that many of the open source foundations are participating in to help represent the overall community in terms of defining these standards and specifications. So a prediction, which feels barely like a prediction and more like a fact, is that a whole bunch of us in this industry are going to be working together over the next at least 12 months to help try to solidify those recommendations that would then become, the leverage points for the legislation. That's already starting, right? But I think there's going to be a lot of that next year. I think the thing that will make the biggest difference in this space the soonest actually is the PCI 4.0 standard, which phases in March of 2025, right? So it was published last March, and some of the provisions in there require things like software bills of materials and a lot of the similar things that we see in these legislation. I remember when it came out, and around, maybe February or something last year. And I was like, oh, wow, great. Yeah. That's going to take effect. And it's like, oh, we have to wait another year for it. So we've been busy doing other things and the calendar moved on, but March is not that far away. And so I think actually there is a potential for the PCI requirements to drive more action across the ecosystem generally, because financial fintech type companies tend to be more progressive on this area anyway, and then for example, as opposed to big government integrators, things that would be subjected to the executive order SBOM standards, right? Those things take much longer because the procurement process, they might be on a 10-year contract, so it wouldn't affect some of these things until, the next up of their contract kind of thing. But the PCI standard, I don't believe has that long tail to it. So my prediction is we're going to see some action. There's probably going to be some people who haven't been paying attention, and come March, they're going to be scrambling to try to figure this out. But I'm looking forward to the fact that we finally will have something with a bit of teeth in at least one of the industries next year.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think actually, we're going to follow the exact same pattern that we followed with GDPR, right? About 20% of the population remembers about it beforehand, starts process, starts work. About 3 months before it starts biting, we're going to start see some scrambling. Sometimes we even see deferred deadlines. So for example, with NIS 2, which is sort of a precursor to CRA, in terms of it puts some security requirements already. That was actually supposed to be enforced a month ago, but most of the European Union nations haven't passed the laws. They're nowhere near being able to actually enforce it at this stage. So a lot of that has been delayed sort of into next year. So I think what we're going to see with the CRA is a little bit of a different picture, because there's so much collaboration, to your point. Like the working groups are forming. There's about 58 standards, if I remember correct, that are going to be defined with industry, with regulators, et cetera, that kind of define the sort of which industry should be covered with more sort of strict sanctions, what are the minimum technical requirements, et cetera. It's going to be quite specific. And so I do honestly think that it's going to set a sort of minimum floor of what application security, software security, and supply chain security are going to look like globally, because it's such a big market that it's just like GDPR is going to, as much as we all like clicking on those cookie bars, they are going to set that minimum bar of regulation. So in that sort of sense, I think next year the prediction to me is that we're going to see the front runners start putting that into place. We're going to see some frameworks that describe how that's going to come out, and I think we're going to get to see maybe even some early. To your point, PCI is a good example. If you don't get the certification, you're not going to be able to process credit card payments. That's a big material impact. And in the finance world, we also have something called DORA that's going to kick in January. Already seeing the effects kind of happening behind the scenes, where businesses are kind of sort of being asked a lot of DORA-related questions. I think next year is going to be a mad scramble for many places just to kind of come to terms with the fact that those sort of requirements are already sort of kind of coming to play one way or the other.
Yeah. I mean, I think, the other thing that's inevitable, on this side of the pond is, we have a new administration coming in, and, as we record this, we're still not sure how that's going to unfold, especially as it relates to CISA. We know that CISA has been a little bit under fire for some of that stuff around the election security. We know that Ms. Easterly is stepping down, as is typical with appointed heads of the departments. We don't know who will be replacing it. I am legitimately concerned, however, because I feel like over especially the last 2 years, CISA has done a great job building up some of their staff with people who are, from the open source community, who understand the nuance of all these things, and they've built great relationships with the different foundations and individuals that never existed before. Prior to Log4Shell, the government was essentially nowhere to be found, as far as I'm concerned, and I can't even count how many different sessions and working groups and things like that I've been a part of, spearheaded by CISA over the last 2 years. So I am very concerned that we will lose a lot of the momentum that has been built there. Hopefully that doesn't come to pass, but it might. And, related, I think we should expect that the new administration will be certainly more business friendly than regulation friendly. I don't think that's controversial.
I don't think that's a big secret at all. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fairly obvious on its face. And so as a result, I think that means we're even less likely to see our own versions of things like CRA and even the software liability reform that I've been kind of pushing. We saw in last year's 10-year ONCD, national cyber strategy, the right kinds of words, recognizing the importance of the open source community, but not trying to, hamper innovation and walking a fine line. I'm afraid all of that gets ripped up and thrown out and replaced with who knows what. And as fortunate as it is to say it, I think, we're going to be dependent upon some of these European Union legislations in the short term and the PCI to try to lead the way. Just like we saw with the GDPR, it's super annoying for me because every website I hit these days is nagging me about the cookies, even though I don't live in the European Union. That's because software is a global market. So pretty much any company that is not a niche player is going to have to be following the best practices laid out by the CRA and the PLD. And that's going to make the software better. That's not like they develop necessarily software separately. They don't build it differently for Europe than they do the rest of the world. And so I think that the trickle-down effects of that will ultimately level up everything, even though we don't necessarily have our own legislation over here.
Well, let me talk on that chord a little bit more, just as a sort of way of a logical sort of thinking as we're talking here, right? So one of the key promises, $2 trillion cut from public spending in the U.S. One element that we all in our profession in cybersecurity rely on is the National Institute of Standards and the NVD, right? And this year, the NVD suffered through sort of a drought of funding, right? And as a result, even right now, I think they have a backlog of about 19,000 CVEs that have not been enriched enough for it to be published as a sort of fully costed vulnerability enumeration. Nearly all of our cybersecurity infrastructure relies on the NVD, more or less. So if, for whatever reason, the funding to that program is cut, we're going to have to have our hands full as an industry trying to figure out how to backfill that sort of valuable source of information. That's, of course, we don't know anything about what the administration is going to do, what's going to happen there, and how they're thinking about it. But I think it's a pretty safe bet to make that backlog is probably not going to disappear anytime soon either.
I don't think so. I mean, the number of these new things is increasing, as we've shown in the stats year over year. That unless there is a high potential for collateral damage, certainly. If funding is cut, I think CISA was kicking in some to help get that contract going again. If funding is cut there or the department is merged into something else, there could be some collateral damage there. I suspect, though, that was a multi-year contract with the vendor coming in to help lift the NVD backlog out. That probably doesn't go away, but if they shut down the department like we like to do with the shutting down the government, any bets are off at that point. So who knows? It is a
exactly.
risk. Yeah,
but I think that just underlines really the sort of perspective of, look, we also need to think about, luckily the CRA actually funds the European equivalent in ESA to start up a European vulnerability database. So we're probably going to see the emergence of sort of various regional catalogs and finding out ways of how we're going to merge that. It's going to be a big thing. The reason why I say that it's a prediction, though, is it's going to cause chaos in incident management if we don't figure out or at least be aware of that potential risk. So anyway, that's a jolly prediction. Why don't we move on to another one? Let's talk about something fun. Let's talk about AI. What's your predictions about AI next year?
What's AI? I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's a little word. It starts with an A, ends in an I. It does your homework and your Christmas cards too.
Yeah, I think we're clearly we're going to continue to evolve there. Is it going to evolve as quickly as it did in the last couple of years? Maybe not. We might be entering a little bit of a trough of disillusionment type of thing as everybody, gets over the hype and then tries to figure out what the new norm is and how to best leverage this. Clearly, there's lots of startups around AI. It's been equated to the new gold rush, but most of them probably won't survive, just like the .com boom. So AI is not gonna go away, but all of the startups trying to cash in on that, it's going to be interesting to watch. But as the usage and the workloads mature, I think, we're going to start to see some of the promise of that. We may also, as a society and an economy, start to have to reconcile, the impact to various jobs that become redundant to good enough AI. It's already happening in some places, but I suspect it will happen at a broader scale, at least over the next 12 to 24 months, with potentially large ramifications for society as that happens.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's this Swedish company by the name of Klarna does online payments. They pretty openly said that they are cutting 50% of their entire staff, and they expect it to be fully backfilled with AI, and they already did it in their customer support. So definitely, I think it's an understatement to say that it's going to have some ramification. I think it will definitely have some. I think for me, I take a little bit of more sort of practical approach to it. I think that we're going to see more of AI assisted malware generation. We're already seeing it today.
Of course.
In fact, I think about a year and a half ago, we discovered what we think is arguably the first ChatGPT generated piece of open source malware within the software supply chain. I think it was an NPM package. And it was pretty clear because one of our security researchers actually managed to reproduce the code one-on-one by prompting ChatGPT in Spanish, if you remember that one.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's already a given, for about 60% of code on GitHub is being produced with Copilot. I'm pretty sure that 60% of malware is also being produced by either Copilot or, broken down models.
There's that aspect, and then there's the fact that it makes it much easier to effectively DOS open source maintainers with plausible looking pull requests and or bug reports that, on their face look real, but are garbage, and then just basically filibuster them with crap so that they can't actually do good work. That, I think, is already happening. If it happens more, that's going to be very problematic for the ecosystem at large.
Yeah, and I think another sort of groundbreaking ramification is that the infrastructure around AI, the supply chain that's formed around it, the tooling, the sort of the ways to integrate it into your software, the actual model files themselves are already subjects to software supply chain attacks. You see the exact same phenomenon happening as in normal, dependency land. And I think that's just going to get worse. The adoption curve is so exponential. It'll be a surprise if we don't see sort of the first major AI targeted supply chain attack next year.
Yeah, for sure. And, we were just talking about this earlier this week, but, we're seeing a lot of organizations, when we do analysis of their applications, we're finding these open source models in places where they vehemently deny, we're not using AI. Our developers are not using AI. And, I kind of laugh because 12, 13, 14 years ago, we would talk to people at organizations and say, we're not using open source. Meanwhile, the developers were pulling down, 60,000 components from Maven Central a year. And so there is clearly a repetition there that there's a disconnect in what's actually being used versus what they're supposed to use and what the leaders think are being used. So I suspect that will get more attention in the next year. As people mature that not only their use, but their governance of what's going on as well.
Yeah, I really think so. I think, we'll both see sort of rapid maturation of the engineering practices of integrating AI, but we're also going to see people targeting that exact process because that's exactly what happened to open source. It became popular, grassroots pull. It's just too big to stop. If you think that your developers aren't using or playing around with AI, I think you're deluded at this point. Everybody's doing it and playing around with it, and that's why new features will come out. But as a shadow phenomenon, that means that there's sort of urgency and importance to getting control of what the dependency management of those components are, and getting them under the sort of software factory umbrella that you might have, or engineering platform umbrella you might have already.
Yep. So maybe we leave it at there.
Yeah.
Covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, I feel surprisingly depressed with that, but I think it's more good than it is bad, and it's our job to be thinking about the depressing stuff. So,
Mhm.
yeah,
Well,
Brian,
I mean, when we're
thank
in
you
the
very
space,
much.
it's hard not to be jaded after a while because we see all these things and it's hard to drive action, but we get there eventually, kicking and screaming.
And I think these regulations are really a sign that even if different countries move a little bit in different direction, I think the general direction of travel, no matter where you look, is going to be towards we are going to be much more standardized than we have ever been in the past and regulated. So with that thoughts, Brian, thank you very much for this year. Looking forward to a very interesting 2025. Who knows what we'll find out.
That's right. See you next year.
Have a good one.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Techstrong.ai video series. I'm your host, Mike Bizarre. Today we're with Ken Wong, who is Chief AI Officer for Distributed Apps.ai, and we're talking about exactly how are we going to manage all this governance and compliance that exists around AI applications, because I think we're finally starting to understand the scope of the challenge. Ken, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Mike.
When you talk to customers, what's the relative level of maturity about this? I think, it feels like to me, we're so excited about building the app in the first place that we didn't really think about how it was going to be managed after the fact. And now people are asking tough questions about like, what's in this thing and how does it work? What's the level of transparency? So where are we on the journey?
Yeah, I think we are still in the early stage, especially with generative AI. There is some kind of established practice with the legacy AI, if I can call, or predictive AI. But with generative AI, I think everything changed because of non-deterministic nature of the AI.
So who ultimately is going to be responsible for all this? Is it the same folks that have been doing this all along, or will there be new teams with different tools who are specifically taking this challenge on?
Yeah, I think this may be a good question. That's why at the Cloud Security Alliance, we have the AI corporate responsibility working groups. We try to building a matrix to map who is responsible for what. Like, if you have the chief data officer, or you have CTO, or now like you have the new laws from the Biden administration. It's kind of mandated from the executive order, right? The AI executive order, that each federal agency has a CAIO, or Chief AI Officer, laws. So the matrix we are building, we actually applied to 3 different white papers that we are working on. The first one is the core responsibility, which is really if you build your own model or if you fine-tuning the model, that's the model and also where you get the data, right? So the model, the data, and also the vulnerability in terms of the AI. So that's the first white paper we published in April. And in after 6 months in October, just a month ago, we published a second white paper, which is more close to related to what we are talking. It's the GRC, the governance, risk management, compliance, and also culture. So that's the most recent one. Currently, we have the third white paper in public review. Welcome everyone to jump in to review it. It's more on the downstream of the model applications. That's including the applications, tools, frameworks, even the supply chain. So this is out for public review.
Are we ultimately going to have AI agents that manage those tasks? In effect, the AI manages the AI, or how do you see that all playing out?
Yeah, I hope this is the kind of the future, the foundation, right? But nevertheless, the human always have to be in the loop. Currently, everyone is talking about using the AI agent for the SOC or Circulate Operations Center, right? And also for the defensive or even the offensive security, red teaming. Some of the company, kind of like Anthropic, even OpenAI or Microsoft as well, in their red teaming practice, they actually, I think it's especially Google, it's public in terms of how they doing it. They have the red teaming agent, blue teaming agent, and have the judge to judge what are they doing, right? So, yeah, so this is a ongoing kind of area of research, and also some practice is very nascent. It's just a beginning.
Do you have any thoughts as that develops? One of the things I've seen already is there's a lot of AI agents running around, and I'm scratching my head trying to figure out, well, how will they all get orchestrated to create something that feels like a workflow that might span governance, compliance, or is that the next frontier of research?
Okay, yeah, this is certainly, I believe with you, Mike, that's the new frontier of research. And one of the candidate framework that we propose, I work with as 40 other people. That's under the OWASP umbrella, Open Web Application Security Project. They released the top 10 for LLM. We recently released a candidate framework for the agent, agentic AI, in terms of access control, orchestration, confused deputy. So certainly, I just like when you're talking about this agent, that's a kind of attack surface in large, right? You can have in the planning kind of phase, you may have some attack surface there, and also in the reasoning, reflection, and eventually the execution phase. So each phase, there is a potential vector of attack and potential vulnerabilities. So I think this OWASP is trying to do it. And in the Cloud Security Alliance, we do have another working group called AI Control Working Group that I'm co-chair. We're trying to build the matrix, right? Given different control, we're using the cloud control matrix as a baseline and add more AI-related control, including the agentic AI, right? And then we're trying to see who is responsible for what, who is impacted, and what kind of vulnerability it could be. This is a huge matrix we are building. It's we're almost done. It should be in public review early next year.
Do you think the regulators and auditors are starting to figure all this out and they're going to be asking tougher questions soon, or are they still like pretty far down the road from figuring any of that out yet?
So the Biden administration has the AI Safety Institute, right? It's kind of spearheaded by NIST now. It's very good. I actually visit the innovation lab. It's big. It's huge. It's very, very good. Like so, they did do a lot of work, but they are not regulators. They of course they help in terms of one of the requirement in the executive order is to build the testing or red teaming practice, the evaluation matrix, and then this has the AI IMF or risk management framework. Focus on how do you measure the risk, how do you map all this risk, and then how you manage and govern, right? And we actually leverage this in our the GRC responsibility white paper as well. We're not replicate what already have. It's a really good document, but we leverage what it has, reference it, and create our own kind of matrix there.
As we go forward, is it really just a matter of time before we have some sort of crisis and then maybe we learn from the crisis? Because that seems to be the way we've done everything in the past. So will AI be any different, or can we be more proactive?
Yeah, I think for previous question, I didn't give you a clear answer about regulate, right? So I think I do still need to mention that because Trump is reelected, one of his kind of initial action will repeal all the executive order from Biden administration. So potentially that could be right. Right. It's and I think it's currently there is some slight majority in Senate and also in the House from the Republican. There may be potential to have a clear regulation. Maybe you know that in California, the 1047 bill 1047 was vetoed. It goes through both fourth chamber of the like in the state legislature, right? But vetoed. It's because the reason that Governor Newsom said that is more like too futuristic looking, right? We have to regulate now, but for regulate now, maybe current CCPA or other regulation may be applied. So, given the divided government in terms of legislative body, it's really hard to actually, from federal level, to coming up with some regulation. But there's quite a few states actually already have the AI regulation, right? So it's more like potentially it could be state level. It's not federal level, right? So now give you a question about if there is a disaster, right? Then it may promote the tough regulation. Not necessary. You know, in the crypto space, there's I think you may also heard of FTX collapse, right? It's kind of a disaster for most people, but we don't see as actually any official regulation, right? But there is some of rule making from the SEC, right? And some lawsuit, but eventually, you know, SEC chairman were stepping down, right? So that's that's hard to say.
Already said. I think I think the European Union may be the one who's driving most of this conversation at this point, right?
Oh yeah, EU AI Act is actually enforced, right? So the most of a provision will be in full effect, like in 2 years, in October or August, I think, August 2026. But some of the provision will gradually become applicable. Yeah, so they have very tough regulation. So you have prohibited use. You cannot use like for biometrics identification using AI unless you are law enforcement. You have to apply for exception, right? So there's a prohibitive high medium, low, right? So and then you basically everything from medium to high, you have to do the red teaming testing. You have to place the governance structure. So people said that US is for innovation, right? So EU is for for the regulations. Yes, there is some controversial opinion about EU AI Act, but some company have to deal with it.
There will always be debates about AI. And one of those debates is, so should organizations have like just a center of excellence for AI initially and appoint a chief AI officer, or do we need to kind of infuse this down into our workflows so that, the folks who are running GRC just see AI as yet another thing to be managed, and, we're not creating this isolated thing? Because what happens is if there's a special group doing it, everybody just assumes that they're handling everything.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if you know about that. I recently published a book. It's called The Handbook of Chief AI Officer. In that book, actually, I lay out why an organization need actually a specific law for Chief AI Officer. So one of the main reason is because of technology innovation, especially in the AI space. It's really hard for a chief data officer or CTO or CIO, because they have their own other daily jobs, right? For them to really focus on that, right? So one reason is really the technology innovation, the speed. Another is really the business, right? The business side. So how do you really map the business with this innovation, and also with all this regulation, security, safety? You do need a big organization, need a CIO, I said, and a medium, maybe small, you can have virtual CIO, right? You can hire someone external to be a virtual CIO. So yeah, I agree with you.
So the answer is a little bit of both, because otherwise we basically need everybody to get involved. It's just a question of who's at the front of the proverbial sled.
Oh yeah. I think one thing I have to emphasize: there must be one in the organization to be responsible for AI. So that's whatever the title it is, right? You have to kind of have the AI chief AI officer. Maybe that's a good title.
So what's your best advice to folks? And the converse of that is, what's that one thing you see folks doing today that just makes you shake your head a little bit and go, we're heading for trouble?
Yeah, so the advice, I think it's very important, especially for some established business. They already have the security program in place, right? That will not work in this non-deterministic AI or large language model or multi-models world. So you have to basically change or augment the security program, right? To look at the full stack, like how do you look at how do you select the model, right? How do you do retrieval augmented generation, protect the vector database? If you do the agent, how do you protect the workflow of agent? So this is not in the playbook, in the process, procedure, or policy of whatever the security program the enterprise has, right? And I actually published a book on this as well, published by Springer this April. It's called The Generative AI Security. So in this, I lay out the way how company can build their own security program, not from scratch, but augment because of this new, right, generative AI.
All right, folks, you heard it here. Hey, there's a couple of books worth reading for sure, but it sounds like to me that the AI governance playbook it's a work in progress, and we're all going to learn together. Hey, Ken, thanks for being on the show.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's great to talk to you. Yeah, take care.
And thank you for all watching the latest episode of the Techstrong.ai video series. You can find this episode and others on our website. We invite you to check them all out. Until then, we'll see you next time.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey, thanks for the throwaway here with Tanner Burson, who's Vice President of Engineering for Prismatic. And we're talking about, well, what's real with AI and application development, because we certainly hear a lot of claims, but it's not quite clear to me that they all play out just the way we all might think when we initially hear that first promise. Hey, Tanner, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Folks seem to be all over the spectrum. On the one hand, some folks are saying that developer productivity is going to increase dramatically and we will build more software in the next 2 years than we had built in the last decade. Other folks are helping me to type ahead. My coding is nice, but it's hardly a game changer. So between those two extremes, where are we and what are we seeing and what's reasonable to expect?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I don't think any of us know yet exactly where the real is. You have folks like, I think it's the CEO of the AWS division at Amazon saying, within a decade, they won't have any software engineers and it will all be AI. And flip side, you have, it was the CTO of Azure recently, or not Azure, it was the Google Cloud side, talking about, they've invested heavily and maybe 25% of their code is generated by AI today. And so there's a pretty broad spectrum, even at the very high end of the industry in terms of what's realistic today and where that's going. I think like most things, it probably lands in the middle. But I also think most day-to-day engineers aren't likely to see their lives dramatically changed or altered by where this technology is and where it's likely to be in the next couple of years.
And one of the things I'm still scratching my head about is like, well, just because we generated more code doesn't mean that code actually made it into a production environment, because theoretically that code is running to the average and we want the code that goes in the production environment to be better than average. So what exactly are folks doing with all this stuff? I mean, is it kind of using it maybe well for if I need to integrate something to a pipeline, fine. But am I really writing business logic? I'm not sure.
Similar. I think a lot of the claims are overblown based on the kind of day zero of starting a new project. There's a ton of boilerplate. There's a ton of kind of speculative, rough sketch kind of code that gets written. And I think a lot of the AI tools are great for that. They can help you think through some of those initial rough sketches very quickly and maybe work through a couple of those rough sketches much faster than you would have before. But they don't have the context in your actual business domain. The AI tools are looking at a handful of text files and trying to give you a likely next set of things that would be helpful given that limited context. You have the context of your business domain. You know what your customers are looking for. You know the real problems to solve. And so ultimately, it is still up to the engineer to figure out what the right software to build is, how that needs to work, and what's going to happen. I think some of the AI claims are a little overblown in light of that.
It does seem, though, that we have this obsession these days with developer productivity. So if it's not coding, what is hampering developers from being more productive?
It's the same things it's always been. Problem solving is hard. Debugging is hard. There's a famous quote I really need to go get the source of because I've used it a couple of times recently. But everyone agrees that debugging is harder than writing code. And therefore, if we write code as clever as we possibly can, by definition, we're not smart enough to debug it. And I think that has always been true. And I think with AI tools, it makes it easier to write code that you don't understand. And you don't understand the implications of. You don't understand the security, the performance, all of the other characteristics that go into building software. So when we talk about developer productivity today and what's hampering it, it's an increasingly complex security environment. Compliance requirements are going up. Everybody is SOC 2, Type 2 at least for their SaaS businesses today. Performance is more important than it's ever been. The tools for managing that have gotten more complex, not simpler over time. building software is a complex environment, and we haven't actually done much to simplify that. And I think some of the AI tools attempt to manage the complexity by doing it for you, not by removing the complexities that are there. And in a lot of cases, I think it adds more unknowns to a process that is already hard, not removing them from you.
Are we kind of in danger of being overly reliant on these LLMs? Because they do endeavor to be extremely helpful, and they kind of give you the sense that they're confident in their proposal to you, and we don't review it then. And do we need to be really careful about what exactly we're putting in the system, even though it might have been created by a machine?
Absolutely. I think companies have long relied on code review as a tool for keeping a high quality bar in their code, ensuring that more than one engineer on a team understands how the software is built and that it's following the standards and meets the requirements. I think with LLM generated code, that's even more important. And I think those code reviews have to happen even earlier in the development process. Working with an AI coding assistant or a copilot or whatever the branding for those is for a particular tool turns into you having to do live code review as the code is being generated. And so the skills required to understand that code, understand its implications, ask for iterations, ask for changes, and work through it are the same as if you were working with code written by somebody else in your code base. You just can't assume that they know the business domain, that they understand the underlying problems, that they are working with the same intent that an engineer on your team is. You have to dig even deeper in those code reviews and make even fewer assumptions than you would for a standard code review. And I think teams that are really reliant on AI code generation are going to have to work incredibly hard to build better code review processes and policies and practices compared to what they were doing previously.
I can't help but feel it, as great as it is to have an AI tool that writes code, maybe we need more focus on AI tools that do all the other jobs that we don't want to do that are actually hampering productivity, such as reviews and testing.
I think there's a strong argument that code is not the most important place to work on developer productivity. If we think of the broader discussion we were just having around where is code, where is that productivity going? And I think some of the second or third generation of these tools will be more focused on things like looking at the security implications of code, looking at your actual runtime environment and what are the real security and performance profiles of that, and being able to provide guidance and input into the process at an earlier stage. But those tools aren't there yet. There's a lot of promises by some of the some of the security vendors in particular, that they will shift left with AI all the way into your dev environments. And I haven't seen any of those work yet, but I do believe that's where we're going to see a lot of long-term value, is on the runtime side, the observability side of your platform, and the ability to reason about that more clearly and make decisions about that while you're building the software, as opposed to only after it's been in production.
The other thing that often leaves me scratching my head is like, well, let's just say we can produce more code than ever. It's not clear to me that the DevOps pipelines and the delivery side of the house is able to absorb all that. So do we need to kind of revisit how all those workflows are going to work if we're going to be essentially increasing the amount of code moving through those pipelines by several orders of magnitude?
It's a good question. One of the problems I have heard discussed by teams that have adopted a lot more AI code generation is the size of the releases has gone up. Because they've been able to write more code, the amount of code they put out in a given release has gone up. In some ways, that creates more risk than before. A lot of the DevOps practice over the last decade has been moving towards smaller, more atomic releases, being able to push out small, immediate changes, roll back small, immediate changes. And the AI-generated code allows people the idea that they can get more done and push out larger changes, which now creates a debugging and observability challenge of larger changes going into production and needing to monitor those. I haven't yet seen anybody try and tackle how to break those into smaller units and whether there's tooling that can help push that at a faster rate. But it's a really interesting thought of how do you continue to push that down even further.
And what is the mechanism that we're going to use to generate the machine code? I mean, today we seem to be trying to insert these things into an IDE, but I scratch my head and I go, well, the machines are more efficient and we only created the Java language to make it easier for humans to interact with a machine. But if a machine is talking to another machine, do we need a different construct, or will we see a more lower level kind of construct, or are we going to go the other way and it'll be more of a higher level abstract and we'll have something even more interesting than low code?
There's a lot of interesting ideas in there. Some of those going back to the 1970s and 4DL languages and visual programming and things that have been kind of tinkered with for as long as we've been building software. I think where we've landed is that code is a tool for humans to understand problems. And if we were just trying to tell the computer what to do, we'd all still be writing assembly. But we've built these higher order languages and these complex tools and frameworks, not because they're more efficient for the computer, because they're easier for us to build more complex software and to understand that better. I think if we're going to move away from code as something that humans use to understand the problems, we absolutely should be revisiting whether LLMs should be generating code at all. Is that even the right artifact for them to be creating? If a human doesn't need to see it and doesn't need to interact with it, is that the right vehicle? I personally don't think that's a great direction. I think ultimately, as noted, there's not enough context in these tools to understand the problems. Ultimately, we build software to solve problems, not just to write code and to keep computers busy. We're trying to solve real problems that have for people. And to do that today, people need to understand those problems and be able to break them down, describe them, understand them, debug them. And code is still the best tool we have for doing that. So I think there's some interesting theoretical concepts in there, but I don't think we've yet landed in a place where those are super viable.
We also hear a lot of chatter now about AI agents, and the subtle difference here being that, in theory at least, an AI agent is able to reason and incorporate some data in real time and execute some task on your behalf. I can see how that might work within a workflow of an SDLC, but won't I have, potentially hundreds of agents that I have to then figure out how to orchestrate and manage? And that SDLC is made up of a group of AI agents and people trying to figure out how to build that thing together. It feels like it's going to get complicated.
One thing that has been true in my entire career of software is we've yet to make it actually simpler. It feels like the process of building software today is as complex or more complex when I got into it, 30 years ago. Now, the software we're building is far more complex and far more capable than what it was on a small DOS terminal back then. But I don't see any indication that humans are likely to try and reduce the complexity here. We seem good at adding layers and adding more abstraction to this, but reducing it doesn't seem to be in our path right now. I agree. I think currently the addition of AI seems to be increasing the complexity of the development process and the development environment, and more challenges and more things to overcome, not solving core fundamental issues. I might think differently if I was on a greenfield team of 2 or 3 engineers trying to build from scratch new software, but working in a more complex, established environment, it's much harder to reason about how those tools are going to fundamentally shift what we're doing.
Ultimately, what's your best advice to folks? I don't think we want to ignore AI, but I think we have to find some way to constructively experiment with it.
I agree. I think the right way is the same way you would any other tool in your development environment. Engineers love fiddling with their IDE and finding new tools and new ways to improve their workflow. And I think there are places for AI in a variety of different pieces in the workflow. I think different people and different teams have unique problems in ways that where it fits is going to be different. And so my recommendation would be the same as any other tool set, which is to figure out where you're having problems, where there's opportunity for you to improve it, and look at what the landscape of tools is. Look at where LLMs could help, look at what they're good at, look at what they're bad at. I also think actually understanding what they do. Not everybody needs to be able to go build an LLM from scratch, but I think understanding at its core the behavior system and the modeling and the way the systems interact is key to having some intuition as to where they're a good fit and where they may or may not be a good fit. And so I think ignoring it entirely is the wrong answer. Being dismissive of the capabilities is certainly not right either. But I think having a healthy skepticism and understanding what are good spaces and what are poor spaces for that kind of experimentation will be important.
So looking in your crystal ball, and let's go all the way to the end of 2025, maybe into 2026, is the way we build software fundamentally any different, or we're going to pretty much be doing the same thing, maybe with a little less toil?
I think we're doing the same thing we are today a year from now. I think next year is a year a lot of companies who leaned hard into AI this year are going to learn where the really sharp edges are. Like a lot of advancements, there are easy wins at the beginning, and some of those you pay for later. And so I think there's going to be a lot of companies trying to learn how to debug code that they didn't write, trying to understand how to deal with systems that they don't understand well enough to really make sense of, and figuring out what that means for what's next for them. I don't think most companies are going to look dramatically different, at least on the software side. I think we're going to look at building software in IDEs with code much the same way we do today, maybe with a few better helpers and a little less boilerplate here and there.
All right, folks, you heard it here. On one extreme, if you're terrified of AI, you probably shouldn't be. On the other end, if you think AI is going to do everything for you, you might want to temper those expectations. Hey, Tanner, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, it was great.
And back to you guys in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hi everyone, this is Axel Labruna from Argentina, and I'm glad to be here with all of you in the DevOps Experience 2024. I hope you like this talk. We're going to chat about platform engineering and FinOps, that they are both two trending topics nowadays. So we can start right now. We will start with FinOps. It's a term we are using a lot nowadays. And what this is about? Well, FinOps is the practice of optimizing the cost in cloud without sacrificing speed, quality, or security, because it's pretty simple for anyone to cut costs, right? Without considering these 3 points that are quite important for our applications. Without quality or security, there's no chance to get an application to production. So the challenge here is to maintain all of these 3 pillars: speed, quality, and security, and at the same time taking care of the cost we are having in the cloud, right? Because sometimes we just move our applications, we modernize them, or we just migrate to the cloud, but without considering cost. And when the bill comes, it's like a shocking surprise, right? This practice has that intention to cut those costs that are unnecessary, or maybe that comes with, for example, resources that are not used properly or are oversized. those things and a lot more comes with FinOps. And just to deep a little more into the framework that FinOps give us, it's like Scrum, for example. Scrum give us like a framework, like some guides. It's not a recipe for success, but it's just a guideline to follow and to have like better practices and a good roadmap to transition this cloud cost optimization process. So the first time it's very important to maximize, right, the business value in the organization, aligning those strategies that the business has with technology. Most of the times they are treated separately, so that brings like a lot of issues and arguing because business wants something, technology says another. So the first recommendation, the first guideline here is to work together to align strategies, right? And to have like a smooth process involving everyone. We'll see that FinOps framework give us like a couple of roles that are suggested from each area and each specialty. So the point here is to work as a team from the start and aligning those strategies. The other thing is, once we have those roles or those people into this process and this exercise, we can incorporate processes, skills, and tools for both engineering, finance, and business teams, right? The idea is to give all of them different skills, processes, and tools to make the job done, right? We'll see in the couple of slides some tool that we have to work with. But if you enter to the FinOps.org page, you can see like a lot of suggestions, tools that are aligned with these practices, and select the best option for you, for your company, the one that is more suitable in that specific time of your process, right? Maybe one tool, it's useful in one particular time, but then a couple of months later, when you are like more mature in your process, you will need to replace it or to add some other into your pipeline. So finally, the idea we were talking before is to work collaboratively and make data-driven decisions. That's very important because sometimes this kind of process where business and technology argue because they don't know very well each other, and the discussion is about we don't need security, we don't need quality, we don't need this tool. It's about feelings or sensations, or maybe like it's something that it's not valuable for us in our point of view, but it is for the other. So to avoid all those things, it's important to have data-driven decisions, and these tools that FinOps give us help in that way, right? We can also add a lot of more complex ideas, tools, and processes, but we can start small. That's an important thing, starting small, but always having like a data-driven decision process, right? That's the ultimate thing as very important to start with in this process. Then the other thing we are gonna talk about, and it's like very related to, it's platform engineering. Maybe you have came across with this term, maybe not. Maybe you are just someone that's working in technology or business, and you start hearing about DevOps, DevSecOps, SRE, platform engineering, cloud ops, master goal, all kind of terms, right? So what is platform engineering about, really? What's the difference between the other roles? Well, just to give like a quick idea, for example, let's say that we have 3 teams in the company. There are 3 squads, software development teams or DevOps teams, whatever you like. But the important thing here is that every team has its own process, its own tools, its own way to develop. So when you have like, in this example, 3 teams, it's like more manageable, it's easier. But if you think of that organization, of that structure in a larger company where you have like hundreds of teams, it starts to become very hard to manage all those processes, and you have like the standardization issues. You find it yourself like managing as like hundreds of tools, because one team uses AWS and GitLab, another uses Azure and GitHub, maybe some other GCP and Jenkins, and it's very hard to maintain, standardize, and ensure the quality and security in all teams, in all tools. So that's where the platform engineering comes into the scene, right? And what's the principal objective of this team? Well, is to standardize those tools, those processes. It's like a center of excellence sometimes, but the focus primary is to standardize tools and processes. This team is in charge of selecting the toolkit, the processes, the frameworks that are going to be used, and then start helping teams to develop their own, for example, tools, scripts, templates, pipelines for their own teams. Their work is about, again, creating a platform where those resources are, and every team, it can be like a DevOps, a software engineer, a quality engineer, can go to that platform and use all those resources that they need for their squads, and also to personalize, to customize those resources. And in that process, there's a lot of feedback from the teams that the platform engineering team can absorb, and have like this continuous process of evolving this platform and the resources they give. So at first, it can seem that it's like very hard. It's a lot of work to do. There involves a lot of teams, a lot of processes and areas that have to agree. And in this moment, I would like to share our experience with my team. In fact, this example is about starting small, right? Because it's the first steps are the harder to take, and the ones that is harder for us to step into, right? So we started, as we can see in this small video, we created for a Latin American client this like platform, may say. We have a repo, a repository of code where we started like this platform where all resources are. We have like templates for pipelines, for building blocks for Terraform. We have scripts. We have guidelines for Docker, Kubernetes. We have all that kind of things. So every team can go to that repo, clone it, and use it for their own good in the team that are working. Again, the idea here is to start small, because there was nothing to start with. We are in zero. So the idea of starting with a big platform with a big budget, it was like very hard, and it wasn't an option at that moment. So our idea was, well, let's start small. Let's start with something. And well, this was our first approach to this platform. We can see a lot of code here that we have it. And this particularly is a tool that we started using. It's called InfraCost. The idea of this tool that is recommended by the FinOps organization. Also, the idea is to know in every deploy the cost of our infrastructure, right? And what's the good point here? When we integrate this tool into our pipeline of continuous integration and deployment, we are making every person in the team responsible for taking care of the infrastructure costs, right? The idea is to not wait until the end of the process to gain this FinOps team and tell us, hey, the costs are going up, what's happening? We don't want to wait until that point. So we took our possibilities, discussed with the whole team, and our first approach was, okay, let's deploy this InfraCost tool. So in each PR, in each pull request that we made, this pipeline runs previously just to check the differences in the infrastructure that there will be with Docker, with Kubernetes. It will see the manifest and the differences, and it will calculate the cost that we have and the differences between this new version that we want to deploy and the previous one that it's been deployed lastly. So when a person comes to this pull request, can also see as a comment the differences in cost that infrastructure will have. So the team can see at first hand the differences, the difference in cost, and decide in that very moment if it's going to accept the pull request or not. If the differences in cost is aligned with strategy, with the objective in the sprint or not. So in that very moment, in that point of time in the development process, we can know exactly how much will cost the infrastructure of our application. That's been a great impact for us because there was like a small amount of people that had that information. That we were in a passive situation where we deployed our infrastructure or our application, and we started and we prayed not to have like someone telling us that our bills were too high. So we wanted to go from that passive situation to an active one, and deploying this tool that it's open source. It was a great start for us to change the dynamic we were having, and this is a very good example of how we make the whole team responsible for the cost, and not just only like a few people in the organization. We have to work together, as DevOps say. You build it, you run it, you're responsible for your own application. So that's a very good point at this situation, right? Well, here is like a little demo, as you have been watching, of how we deployed these changes with Docker, with Kubernetes. Well, that's a small example of what we have done with this tool. As a bonus track, also, maybe we always think of FinOps as just looking at the bill and reduce costs and talking with people about what we are gonna reduce or to remove. And sometimes also with platform engineering, we just think about an internal development tool or platform. But there's space for a lot of ideas, a lot of practices that help us in this direction. One of these tools is the chaos engineering practice or philosophy. Chaos engineering is a discipline of running intentional experiments on our system or our application, and the point is to inject precise and measure damages on our application infrastructure. The idea is to measure the resilience of our application and system and how it responds to different situations. For example, how can we connect this with our talk about FinOps and platform engineering? For example, one thing that we can experiment is the size of our resources in the cloud. Maybe some couple of resources are too big and they are too expensive, and we have this doubt that what happens if we shrink it, we make it smaller, we change the dimensions. What can happen if that thing is done? Well, this practice can give us those experiment spaces and those metrics. For example, we can test how the system responds, how the request, the volume is managed with those different sizes. So it connects directly between the chaos engineering experiments and this kind of intention of reducing cost. And always, as we said, keeping in mind security, quality, and speed. So to sum up, it aims to help us improving our systems, knowing with experiences, with technical and objective experiences, how they respond with different types of failures. What happens if we inject latency in the network, how we reduce resources, we can remove some parts of the application, maybe that we don't need it really. It gives us space to play a lot, following like a method, right? And dipping into the cost thing, chaos engineering always keep us in mind the cost of downtimes, right? There's an equation, a formula to know the cost of our downtimes, and it's basically composed of three parts. The ones that happens during the interruption of the service, with the lost revenue and the productivity of the people because they are developing something new, something nice, better for our application, and they have to stop that work just to extinguish a fire, right? So that's another big loss we have for the business. After the interruption, once we are running again, we are productive, we have client charges, for example, for SLA violations, service level agreements that are not fulfilled. We have another big cost there. And some others that are not easily measurable. For example, the brand information. For example, if we are like in a Cyber Monday, Black Friday, and we enter to an e-commerce to buy like that PlayStation 5 I really want, imagine that I will click on the buy button and it doesn't respond, and I have then a 404 error, I will be like depressed. I'm going to another e-commerce site and I will buy it happily. So next time, I'm not going to buy to the first site. I'm going to the second one. So that's not easily measurable, but that's a cost that implies the downtimes and not being prepared, or maybe focusing too much in the cost reduction and not thinking in quality, security, speed. So just to have like a clear number in head, for each hour of downtime, a typical company loses $300,000 per hour. Amazon, for example, per hour losses like $13 million. So what's the point here? Again, is always focusing in cost and in quality. We have to balance those things to reduce our bills, but always having in mind the application, right? So again, it has to be like a very synchronized work between business and technology. Some tools to practice chaos engineering, some of them that are very famous, like Gremlin. It's a great platform. It has a lot of certifications, free certifications and trainings that I recommend. I have done them all. I like it very much. I started with chaos engineering because of Gremlin, so I recommend it. It's a paid software, but it really gives value to that cost. On the other hand, we have some other tools that are open source. Litmus, for example, it's a great tool that I adore. Some others are more famous, like Chaos Monkey with Netflix. And obviously, cloud providers offers their own tools. AWS, Azure have their own. So those are also great options to start with chaos engineering. But as I said before, if you think that this is a good tool to start experimenting, Gremlin has a lot of documentation, very nicely, very well organized. So it's a good start to read how to start doing chaos engineering again from scratch with small steps. I know we are running out of time. It's time to wrap up. So the key here is, again, to align business with technology, right? It's very important to do that, as we have seen with examples, and the impact both on the applications and the business if we have downtimes, for example. And then lastly, to be financially efficient since the moment of the design and the development of the solution. It's like a very good practice to shift left everything we can, so it's cheaper, it's easier for all of us to have that in mind. Just to have a nice closure, there's this quote I like very much, that where nothing is certain, everything is possible. So when we have these new practices, new frameworks, and we don't have clear or we're not certain of the next steps, the good thing is everything's possible. Just you have to challenge yourself and challenge others to start practicing, to get into new tools and develop new ways to create value to the business, to the people. I hope this talk has been interesting for you. Anyone who wants to keep talking about this can reach me in LinkedIn, in Instagram. There's the QR to have my contact. So that's it. Thank you very much. I hope you are enjoying the DevOps Experience 2024, and until next time.